Hey there gamers, welcome to the video. My name is Kubz, and today we're playing some Insurgency Sandstorm. This is one of my favorite shooters currently, and I think that it's been on sale quite a bit recently. I also think that if you were to go check out some websites like Target or Walmart, you could probably pick this game up for $20 on the consoles. And it's just a fantastic shooter, but it's a little bit different than some of the other traditional shooters that are currently out there. And sometimes when you watch these sort of videos, you just kind of get a glimpse of the gameplay. You know, you get to see some of the more flashy parts of the game where kills are happening, action is happening, and it's really easy to put together kind of like a montage of highlights from your time playing the game. But sometimes that's not very indicative of what an actual game or match looks like. And so I wanted to make this video, and the beginning couple of minutes are just going to be some of those flashier highlights and, you know, awesome moments from some of the footage that I've captured. But towards the end, we're going to sit down together and we're going to watch a full match and just kind of get an idea what the gameplay is like and some of the different gameplay elements, pacing, different things like that. So thanks so much for being here. I hope that you enjoy the video. So I play this game because I like this sort of tactical, hardcore shooter genre personally, and there are certain things that you can alter about the game and the interface to make that more or less immersive depending on how you like it. So typically you can have a indicator on the side of the screen that shows you how many magazines you have left for your weapons. You can also have a compass at the bottom of the screen and different things like that I choose to turn off. There's also indicators for when you go to open doors and when you go to vault windows or low walls. There's also indicators for when you go to pick up another weapon that might be on the ground. And I have all of those sorts of things disabled. So it might look as though there isn't much of an indication of the sort of things that you can interact with while playing the game, but that's just because of my own personal preferences. But this being a hardcore tactical shooter, things like this can happen where you and your teammate accidentally shoot at one another. And it's also a little bit different in the sense that not every action that your character can perform is specifically mapped to a certain button. So in order to swap to your sidearm or to switch to one of your throwable weapons, flashbangs, smoke grenades, frag grenades, things like that, you can press the right bumper or R1 if you're on PlayStation like I am. You can press that button and it'll switch your primary to your secondary weapon, assuming that you're carrying a sidearm with you. Otherwise, you can hold down that button and then there's directional options, and so you can switch to your various grenades or throwables in that sense. And so it's a little bit different in that way where there isn't just one button specifically mapped out for throwing your grenade. There's not one button specifically mapped out for switching your weapon. And so there are certain things that you have to kind of learn about the game before you'll get better at it. But that's one of the things that I really enjoyed about this entire experience, is that there's sort of this learning curve. It's one of the things that sets this game apart from some of the others in the genre, is that as you continue to play the game and figure things out, maybe learn from your mistakes, figure out what weapons you like to use, what class you like to use, you can feel this really rewarding level of skill progression happening. There's also this interesting thing at the beginning of the game where you can just shoot your teammates for the first few seconds while everybody's choosing their loadout. And so you have these sort of interesting moments, along with mentioning that there's a specific button to do specific tasks. You also have to hold down a button in order to use your microphone. And communication is pretty important in a game like this. It's definitely a objective-based shooter, so kills are nice, but playing the objective is really what's more important, and you'll actually score more points by playing the objective. And so there's a specific button that you hold down in order to use your comms. I think that that's really great as well. Fairly realistic in that sort of sense. And there's also proximity chat, so if your enemy is close by and they're talking or you're talking, they can actually hear you, what you're saying. And so that also leads to some interesting moments when you're playing. Now this is the full match that we're going to take a look at. This is a game mode called Domination. Pretty similar to some of the other domination game modes that are found in the shooter genres. There's 3 capture points, and your team gains points based on the number of objectives that you're currently holding. And it's just a fairly free, reign open map for this game type. Now there are other game types that are more objective focused, like attack and defense basically. So there's a game mode called Push, where one team is defending an objective and the other team is trying to secure that objective, and once they have that objective, then the defending team falls back to the next objective while the attacking team tries to advance forward. There's also a game type called Frontline, and Frontline is basically like a tug of war. So there's an objective in the middle, and then whoever secures that objective first now has to defend that objective while also pushing towards the next objective that the now defending team is trying to protect. So there's kind of this push and pull happening there. There's also a game type called Firefight. And Firefight, oh, one moment here. I slowed that down because I noticed a guy run across my screen. And so here, he's sitting right there by that pillar. You might have just seen him. In the moment, I don't really notice him because it's not like he's super obvious. But then as I'm like, wait a second, there was a guy over there. So we get the kill, right? And then, of course, what's going to happen next? We're going to try to get this guy up here. We just saw him move, but nope, we're not quick enough. So these are the sort of things that are happening in the moment-to-moment gameplay. But like I was saying, the game type known as Firefight is kind of a little bit similar to Frontline, where there's a number of... Actually, it's a little bit more like Domination, where there are multiple objectives that the teams are all trying to capture, but your team only has one respawn wave. And so in order to continue to respawn, your team has to capture an objective, and then you're given another wave. And so in that sense, it's like you could both eliminate the enemy team, or you could secure all of the objectives in order to win. So there are all these different objective-based game modes that you can play, and there's really a nice selection of maps as well. And so, again, really fantastic shooter that I don't think has gotten enough attention, or maybe it's just a little bit past its prime. I know that this game released a number of years ago on the PlayStation or on the PC, but it's come to the PlayStation maybe in the last year or two. I've really been enjoying my time with it, and so when I make these sort of videos to try to encourage other people to go out and to pick up this game and give it a try, I'd like to have something on the channel that really kind of shows what that experience might be like if they were to get into this game. So again, in a game mode like Domination, you respawn after you die. And so again, this is probably the closest to a sort of Battlefield or Call of Duty style game mode for that very reason. In some of the other game modes like Push or Frontline, there are respawn waves, and so you have to wait until a certain number of your teammates have also died, and then you all spawn in together. And I really kind of like that. That general concept kind of leads both to the realism and also to like the camaraderie overall, because you're spawning in together and now you're all charging into battle, maybe to defend the point or to attack the point or whatever it might be. Now recently, for the last month, they've had a night battle game type available, and that in itself has been a really wonderful thing to experience because you're able to play multiplayer on all of the night maps. So another element of Insurgency Sandstorm is that there's a full co-op mode, and so in the co-op mode you're playing through various objective-based game types but against the enemy AI. So kind of similar to like a terrorist hunt style game mode, if you're familiar with something like that from the Rainbow Six franchise, where basically there are a number of enemies that might be on the map, and you're working with your teammates to either eliminate them or to push forward and to capture an objective, whatever it might be. And so in that sense, it's really kind of nice and also forgiving, because you can start with one of those game types and you can really kind of get a feel for the game and kind of figure things out without maybe feeling the pressure or the overall like hassle of being in a multiplayer game mode, where maybe your teammates are like, hey, what's going on? Why aren't you doing this? Or why haven't you, done that? Whatever that might be. I also think that domination, if you're starting with Insurgency Sandstorm, I think that domination is one of the better game modes to try to jump into, because of the nature that it's kind of similar to some of those more fast-paced shooters, but also because of the fact that you get more points to spend on your loadout. So in most of the game modes, you get 15 points to spend on your loadout, and that's going to lead to the weapon that you have, the weapon attachments, if you can carry your sidearm or not, what sort of attachments you have on that sidearm, as well as things like your equipment. So that might be your throwable grenades or smoke flashbangs, things like that. There's also your basically a backpack if you'd like to. So you can take a light backpack, which is going to give you access to a second throwable, as well as 2 more magazines for your primary weapon. And then you can also take a heavy backpack, which will give you even more ammo and capacity for equipment. And then there's also armor in the game. And the armor is actually, from what I've understood about it, it's a little bit of a trap for newer players, because the armor doesn't actually protect you from bullets, but it does protect you from things like shrapnel from frag grenades and things like that. And you can have light armor or heavy armor. There's also gas masks, which basically any loadout that you put together, you're going to want to have a gas mask with you, because your character in-game will cough if they're in smoke, and there's also like a hazardous smoke that will kind of hurt you in that sort of sense, and so having on a gas mask sometimes will save your life. So these sorts of things are important to think about when it comes to choosing your loadout, and like I mentioned, most of the game modes will give you 15 points to spend on your loadout, but in Domination, you're given 20 points to spend on your loadout. So it's a little bit more flexible and forgiving in that sense as well. So that'll give you some more options to kind of put together a loadout and try new things, figure out what feels right for you, what sort of equipment you want to carry with you. And another thing that it does is it opens up your weapon options. So there's 2 teams in Insurgency Sandstorm. There's the Insurgents and there's the Security. Each team is given various weapons that are at their disposal. So Security has different weapons than the Insurgents do. And with that in mind as well, there are certain costs associated with these weapons. So from a glance, it might seem like Security has access to what might be better weapons, but they also have higher costs for some of them. The Insurgents are given access to, I believe there's 2 pistols, sidearms that they can choose from that have no cost at all. And so if you're playing on the Insurgent side of things, it kind of doesn't make any sense not to have a sidearm with you. But if you're playing on the Security side of things, you have to pay a point, at least 1 point, in order to carry a sidearm. And sometimes that sidearm is what's going to be the difference between you living or dying. The Insurgents are also given access to a gas mask for free. They don't have to spend a point on it, where the Security team has to spend 1 point in order to carry a gas mask. So these are the sort of things that you kind of navigate as you're figuring out how to play the game, what makes sense, and where you're going to spend your points on your loadout. And so when considering all of those things, when you're playing the Domination game type, you actually have access to both of the Security and Insurgency weapon options, and so you can mix and match as you please. So that'll also kind of add another element where you can experiment with some of the different weapons and get a feel for things regardless of the team that you're currently playing on. And so that's another reason why I would recommend Domination for people who are new to the game. Another quick thing that I did want to mention is oftentimes in these sort of shooter games, sprinting and getting places quickly and fast is sometimes like the default for us. We like to get in and get out of the action very quickly. But in Insurgency, there's a little bit of a kind of like a buffer between when you're sprinting and when you can raise your weapon to look down sights. and so running around the map isn't always the best idea for you. Another thing that's very important in this game is the sound, and so if you're running, then you're going to be more noticeable to your opponents, and I definitely recommend wearing a headset. So hopefully you found this video pretty useful. Go check out Insurgency Sandstorm. I have been and always will be Koobs. Peace and love, gamers.